So welcome one and all, and let's hop into today's program. So we will be focused on capacity building today. There's three great speakers, and we have a great lineup. So if this is your first members only event, please know the following. This is the third of our calendar year in terms of capacity building um, trainings that we offer through SDMFC. We have had the wonderful pleasure of onboarding 26 organizations over the last year in terms of being a part of an authorized or designated SDMFC member organization. And more so, we've obviously been working to collaborate, connect, and a lot of the speakers that you'll meet with today have also been gracious with their time, knowledge, and content. So you'll get a lot out of today's agenda. But I'd like to introduce your moderator, or I should say your guest speaker, who will kick it off to begin with, which is Shelby Thomas from 0800. Shelby.
Hi, good morning, everyone. As Danny mentioned, my name is Shelby Thomas. I'm the program director at 0800, as well as an SDMFC coordinating council member. And today we are going to be covering a lot, but really the intention of today's training is to help build capacity. So we will be covering three different segments throughout today: growing your volunteer network, grants and funding, and using media to increase visibility. So we're going to start off with a breakout group. Next slide, please. Okay, so our first breakout group is if you can just introduce yourself and the organization you're a part of. And we're going to do a little bit of trivia to see kind of what everyone knows and see if anyone can, in your groups, come up with some of the top three donors in San Diego. So we're thinking individuals of kind of all time. And we'll have about 3 to 5 minutes in these breakout groups.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you were able to connect. And Shelby, tell us what's up next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So I don't know if anyone had any guesses that they wanted to share. You can share them in the chat or feel free to speak up if you'd like.
So in our breakout room, we talked about the Kroc family. We talked about, gosh, I just went blank right now. We talked about the Jacobs family. I don't know if someone else from our group wants to share, but there was quite a few local.
The Rady's family.
The Rady family. Thank you.
Copley Price family.
Yeah, you guys did very good. I think all of those people are in the top 10. The top three that I found were Joan B. Kroc, Joan and Erwin Jacobs, and then Ernest Rady. So good job. My group and I were talking about, you see all these names around, like on libraries and buildings, and it kind of makes sense. They're all recognizable names. But thank you all. Okay, so moving along. We are going to head into our first presenter. So Carlos Gomez is a nonprofit professional with nearly a decade of experience in San Diego's nonprofit sector. Throughout his career, he has worked with passionate nonprofit colleagues to secure private and public grant contracts for college and workforce readiness programs, homeless services, food distribution programs, and other social services. He is passionate about equitable access to educational workforce and housing opportunities for all San Diegans, and especially for those facing barriers to self-sufficiency and well-being. In his spare time, Carlos is an avid sports fan, enjoys long walks with his canine companion, and loves spending time with his friends and family. So to talk about grants and funding, Carlos Gomez.
Hey, hello everyone. Thanks for having me here. And as Shelby mentioned, I've been in the nonprofit sector here in San Diego since 2013, and I just hope to share some of the knowledge and tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way. And so I'll get started. And so I'll start with so how do we find grants, right? How do we research and find the right funder? And what I found throughout my experience and work in the grants profession is that it is always best to follow the paper trail, right? As we discussed earlier, we're identifying the top three funders or individual givers, right? Who are those most actively giving and making charitable contributions in the region, right? And so when it comes to private foundations, corporates, and so on and so forth, the best approach is to look at their giving history. Are they giving in your geographic area? Are they giving for your type of organization? Are they giving for your type of program? Are they giving for your type of support, right? Whether it is a program, capital, general operating. And there are many tools that can help you find all this information. Some obviously are fee-based, others are free of cost, right? So we'll start with the fee-based services. There's some search engines out there, such as the Foundation Directory Online or Grant Station, which are essentially grants or funder search engines or databases that allows you that consolidate all the information you need, such as deadlines, types of support, a funder's priority area, so on and so forth, and also allow you to run tailored searches, based on either your type of nonprofit, your type of program service, your service area, and other search filters, right? But the good news is that there's also a lot of free of cost tools out there, but obviously they require a little bit more legwork and a little bit more digging, right? And so community foundations are a great way to find prospective grant makers, right? A lot of them often disseminate monthly, quarterly newsletters where they list a lot of upcoming grant deadlines and opportunities, such as the San Diego Foundation would be a perfect example of a local community foundation that is actively sharing resources with the nonprofit community. Another tip or trick that's also very useful are annual reports. A lot of nonprofits put out annual reports, and more often than not, they have a donor acknowledgement section where they list all of their funders and all of their supporters. And I guarantee you, if you look at different nonprofits and you look through their annual reports, you'll soon realize or start recognizing patterns in the same names, right? The same foundations give to the same nonprofits, right? So you have the Price Charities, the Sable Foundations, the Copley Foundations, the Parker Foundations. Those tend to be the larger local nonprofits that are very active in the region and award and actively make grant awards. So naturally, you want to start with those funders who have a history of not only giving in San Diego or your location, but also giving for your type of nonprofit, your type of program, your type of service, because then that increases the likelihood that they have a passion, they have an interest, they see your mission, they value your mission, and so again, that increases your the probability that you get funded. But once you identify a funder, if you don't have access to a fee-based database, like what do you do? How do you know how much to ask? How do you know what programs are funding? Well, 990s or tax returns are a great way to find all this information, right? And so more often than not, foundations are required to put out or report, their finances, and they often have a list of funders, right? And so in that list, you can find key recipient or grantee information, such as like how much, the amount that was awarded, their location, and also like the purpose of the grant. So as you browse through 990s and tax returns, you can identify, oh, well, this foundation actively makes awards in the $5,000 to $20,000 range. So then you get a sense of how much money they normally award to nonprofits, and naturally you would want to stay within that range rather.
think we may be having some technical difficulties from Carlos.
I'll try to shoot him a message in the meantime. So if you can just give us 1 minute.
Did my connection drop, or did everybody's try? Was it just mine? Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I know it dropped and then it came back on. So I don't know what was the last thing you heard, but in essence, for a public public grants, it's always a good idea to be aware of what's in the county budget, what's in the state budget. Be knowledgeable of upcoming legislations that could include allocations for like education, healthcare, social service programs and initiatives. And there's also like some of the fee-based search engines. There's also public search engines, and the good news is that they're free, right? And so for county grants, ByteNet's a great resource. For state grants, California Grants Portal, and for federal funding, grants.gov, and even then you can create you can sign up for a newsletter. You can select specific topics or priority areas, types of grants, and they'll send you a newsletter or opportunities tailored to your interest, and that way you can consistently know what's coming, what's out there. And even the good thing about websites like grants.gov, they forecast future grants, so that's also good. So see what's coming and prepare for the grants that will be coming out. So then I'll go to the next slide. And so I was asked to talk about like, what's the approach to building or writing a proposal or submitting a grant application. And so most grant applications or requests for proposals, RFPs, requests for applications, RFAs, notice of funding applications, NOFAs, are pretty much comprised of 8 components, right? And one way or another, a funder will always more than likely request a project summary, an organizational background, a needs statement, outcomes, program description, an evaluation, sustainability, or a budget, right? And just like grant applications have many different names, so do these 4 components, right? And so a project summary may also be called a project abstract, a proposal summary, a grant overview, and simply put, funders here are looking for a quick overview of your proposal that identifies the applicant, the amount requested, the goals and outcomes, and the project timeline. And next, we have the organizational background, also known as the org description, org summary. And here, applicants want to focus on describing the agency's mission, their history, their vision, their values, and showing capacity to show that they have capacity to implement the project. Right, and next in the needs statements are you essentially want to show that there's a need for your program, and you do that by using statistics and studies, and also qualitative data of what are the experts saying, right? What are our elected officials saying in terms of the need for your service, or the problem, right? And obviously in the needs statement, you always want to use data that is as localized as possible and compare it to countywide, statewide, and nationwide numbers to sort of compare and contrast how the need looks here as it compares to county, state, and local and federal numbers or nationwide numbers. And next is the outcomes. Funders often call this section the impact, the results, etc. And pretty much applicants should focus on proposing SMART outcomes, right? Which are outcomes that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And program description, or the methods, or the activity section, as they may sometimes be called, is where you demonstrate how you will carry out your program from start to finish, and how your methods and activities will achieve the outcomes you proposed. And together, the needs statement, the outcomes, and the methods or description is essentially the core of your proposal, right? And those always need to align to make a logical sense to the funder. And so you're able to communicate what's the need, how you will improve the need, and by how much, right? And show the impact, in other words. And again, evaluation, you show how you'll measure your progress, sustainability, you give funders the confidence that that your project or program, will exist beyond the grant period. And the budget, the budget essentially describes your program in numbers, right? And also be very cautious of including expenses that do not align with your program description. That's something that could be somewhat common. And so again, it's the best approach to building a proposal is to make sure that all the pieces fit, right? And again, you'll encounter funders will ask for these different components in one way or another, guaranteed almost every single time. And so the best bet is to, as you submit grants, create an answer library for each of the sections, save them somewhere, reuse the same answers, refine them, tailor them to the foundation or the grant maker. And and that will help you increase your grant submission output. And so next, I'll talk about a little bit about fostering donor relations. And so when it comes to donor relations, networking is the name of the game, right? We're all here networking today. And in relation to building these key to establishing long-term partnerships with funders. But how do we do that? We have to know who the decision makers are, right, at each of the different foundations or government agencies, and which you can often find them in on their website. But most foundations, or a lot of foundations, don't have a website. So what do we do then? How do we identify those key people that we need to network and connect with? Well, GuideStar and tax returns, it's another tool that you can, again, going back, you can use, and there you often find the board of directors and program officers for each of the foundations. And you can do run a prospect search, either via LinkedIn, news articles, online bios, and find somebody who may be in their industry, may work for the same company, and share the name with people who you feel may be able to make that connection or open that door or be that champion for your grant proposal. It could be your board, it could be somebody on your senior management, it could be colleagues, it could be somebody here at the San Diego Military Family Collaborative. And so how do we engage them? Volunteer opportunities and site visits are great ways to engage new and existing funders. In fact, like many funders now require that their employees volunteer at your nonprofit to qualify for funding. And you see that a lot in the with corporate funders. And so it's always a good idea to, whenever you have an event, whenever you or for your regular programs and services, always invite your funders and supporters to volunteer, and that allows them to see the impact firsthand. And again, site visits as well, are a good way to make sure, as they say, seeing is believing, right? So if you can have a funder come in, talk to a client, see the program, see the impact, then that really helps to keep them engaged and feel a part of the nonprofit or the agency. And once awarded, make sure to thank them. Thank them via a thank you letter, donor acknowledgement letter, social media post, maybe if your agency has a newsletter, the newsletter, or even a handwritten note from one of the program participants. And also, and then and compliance is key, right? So once you receive the grant, you sign the grant agreement, you cash the check, make sure that you said what you said you do, you spend the money how you said you would spend it, right? And lastly, communicate impact, share videos, photos, success stories, show them how their funding changed lives and transform communities, and show it beyond the numbers and statistics that you'll share in your year-end report or semi-annual or a monthly, whatever that reporting timeline looks like. And that's a good segue to my final slide, which is, what are the best practices for reporting? Just like your calendar deadlines, as soon as you receive a grant award letter and or contract, calendar the reporting deadlines. Make sure all staff, both direct and admin staff, know the outcomes, the timelines, the evaluation methods, the budgets, and the reporting deadlines. Create an internal tracking system. It can be as simple as Excel documents or as sophisticated as a client management system, such as efforts to outcomes, which is the one we use here at say San Diego, and monitor expenses, track staff time and effort on grant funded activities, save invoices, receipts, and it is recommended that you keep track of all programmatic outputs, outcomes, and financial information for at least 3 years. And that's it. That's all I have for today. If you're interested in learning more, or if you're have questions, feel free to send me an email or have Danny connect me with you, and I'll be happy to share some resources here locally and regionally that could help you identify and win more grants. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Carlo. All right. So moving along. So we're going to go into our second breakout group. So our next topic is going to be all on volunteerism. So again, introduce yourself and your organization. And if there's any organizations that you personally volunteer with, or maybe have been hoping to volunteer with, or any areas of interest that you would volunteer with, please share with your group. And again, 3 to 5 minutes, and we'll see you back in a bit.
All right, that should be everyone back. So welcome back, and hopefully you made some connections. Shelby, let's take it from here. Or is this Stacy part?
No, this is still me. So moving into our next presenter, Jessie Case is the Volunteer Engagement Manager for Hands On San Diego, where she has worked for the past 6 years since she was an AmeriCorps Fellow. Jessie recently graduated from the University of San Diego with a graduate degree in nonprofit leadership and management. She grew up in El Cajon and is an active member of Rotary. So Jessie, I will let you take it away from here.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And I guess something I could have included in my bio is that I have a retired Navy dad, so very much appreciate all the work that you all are doing in our community. If we could go, okay. So I'll be speaking specifically about volunteer recruitment and retention. But I wanted to start with just like a general overview of like building capacity through working with volunteers. Thank you. And we can go ahead on to the next slide. So a term you might hear a lot throughout the presentation or as you get more involved in working with volunteers is volunteer engagement. So that's kind of like going beyond volunteer coordination, which is more just getting warm bodies into volunteer opportunities. So volunteer engagement is about working in partnership with people in the community to achieve your organization's mission. And I like this like diagram that has some different things that volunteers look for in a quality volunteer experience. They're not looking to just give their time. They want to feel like their time was meaningful. They had it was enjoyable. Maybe they connected with other people. So those are just things to think about when you're creating a volunteer experience. Is what kind of experience are these volunteers going to have? Is this something that people are going to want to do? If it's something kind of monotonous, how can we make it more enjoyable? Maybe play music or encourage people to interact with one another. Icebreakers are still an option. So just some things to think about. We can go ahead to the next slide. sort of the gold standard in capacity building with volunteers is a service enterprise certification. So I want to make sure I touched on that. It's a certification by Points of Light, which is the world's largest organization dedicated to volunteerism. They do things like the President's Volunteer Service Award. They run a volunteer engagement-like platform called Engage. But basically the service enterprise is you accomplish a training and some coaching. You fill out this like diagnostic about where your organization is at with how it works with volunteers. And then they review it all and hopefully you get the certification. And then you can reapply for the certification every 3 years. It is something I've heard that looks well on grant applications. So if you're thinking about our previous speaker, maybe that's something you could incorporate in how you're achieving sustainability with your program. But basically the service enterprise designates an organization that strategically leverages volunteers to achieve operational efficiency and greater social impact. And something kind of along with that I thought was an interesting key finding of the organizations that are designated a service enterprise. Their organizational capacities are markedly stronger with volunteers that have a strong volunteer management model. So even if it's a small organization, if they had a strong volunteer management model, they had a greater capacity. This is our certification. So we just got recertified last year. And we'll be up for it again in 2024. So happy to talk to you about that offline if you're interested. You can go ahead to the next slide. I also wanted to share some other resources for volunteer engagement. Nonprofit Solutions is probably your like go-to local resource for workshops and learning groups. They also have a, I think those are all fee-based, but they have a quarterly volunteer administrator connector coffee kind of event if you just want to like have a roundtable sort of discussion about things going on at your organization with volunteers. There's also the Association of Leaders in Volunteer Engagement that has their own like conference and resource library. The Leahy Foundation is a foundation that actually funds, one of the things that they fund is strategic volunteer engagement. And they have all sorts of resources for you to go after individual donors funding volunteer engagement or other foundations. Connecting the Cause is a great resource for incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion in volunteer engagement. The founder, Brianna Dorlis, has done some really great presentations if you just like Google her, that really take volunteer engagement to the next step of working with community and not incorporating like getting beyond your organization's privilege. It's just really great thinking things to make you think. And then Volunteer Commons is a blog run by our local volunteer engagement expert, Sue Carter-Kale. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you want to challenge your thinking about volunteer engagement. Go to the next slide. During this presentation, I'm focusing on volunteer recruitment and retention. And I just wanted to point out that's just 2 points on the volunteer life cycle. You can click the 2 animations. This isn't, recruitment and retention aren't the end all be all of volunteer engagement. There's a lot that goes into it, seeing what volunteer opportunities you actually need to create. How do you evaluate those opportunities? How do you place those volunteers? So those will not be covered in this short presentation. You can go ahead to the next slide. All right, so now we'll dive into volunteer recruitment. I like to point out this study that came out at USD. It came out in 2013, but I think it still holds, it's still valid today. They interviewed volunteers throughout the county about what they consider first in selecting a volunteer opportunity. And the thing they rated highest was their schedule. So they want to find opportunities that work with their schedule. Most of the time, though, all of us want those opportunities to work with our schedule. So usually like weekday business hours. So if your organization is able to offer occasional evening opportunities or weekend opportunities, that might increase your odds of getting some more volunteers to help out. Your organization just kind of has to weigh adjusting staff's schedule and things like that. Another thing that they, a major factor for them is location. So is your opportunity flexible? Could it be done remotely? Could parts of it be done remotely? Your location probably isn't too flexible, but maybe you can focus on recruiting volunteers within the neighborhood around your office. Is there a chamber of commerce for that area? Is there a local newsletter or anything like that that you could find where you could tap into more people close to your office? And then cause, I think that people definitely want the volunteer opportunity to resonate with them and be something that they are passionate about. Go ahead to the next slide. Oh, we could go to the next slide.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
And it will come up right now.
Okay, great. So I wanted to share some different sites. These are probably kind of the things that come to mind first when you're thinking volunteer recruitment. I'm sure Volunteer Match came to mind. They're the largest, like, I'm sure they're global. They're definitely a nationwide website for recruiting volunteers. Our site, Hands on San Diego, I hope you definitely see that as a volunteer recruitment resource. We are your local volunteer center. So we focus on organizations within San Diego County and volunteers within San Diego County. And we work more in partnership with you and see the organizations that we work with as partners. So you're not just posting to our site like you would on Volunteer Match, although our site also posts to Volunteer Match and Points of Light's Engage platform automatically. Some other sites you might want to check out are Idealist, where you can also post job opportunities, but they have a volunteer option, which I think Volunteer Match and Idealist post to LinkedIn automatically. So anything you can do where you're spending less time posting to all these sites, I think is a good idea. Just Serve is a site run by the Church of Latter-day Saints. So if you're wanting to get more volunteers from that community, that could be an option, and it's open to the public as well. AARP, they have Create the Good, which could help you tap into more of the retirement community. And then Catch a Fire is a great site for recruiting skills-based volunteers or like board members, and that's kind of their focus. Go ahead. Okay, so now we'll jump into volunteer retention. So getting into volunteer retention, I think it's really important to understand each of your individual volunteers' motivations for volunteering. That might be something that you ask as they join your organization, or if they've been volunteering, why do they volunteer with your organization? There's definitely going to be a lot of different reasons that they feel motivated to volunteer with you. It might just be that your cause really resonates with them, but it might be something that they need something on their resume to get to the next step of their career. They may want to meet new people and develop a stronger community. They might want to gain more understanding about your cause. So there's going to be a wide range of reasons people volunteer. They could have required service hours. And even those folks can like transfer into being really dedicated volunteers. So I wouldn't write them off either. You can go ahead to the next slide. And then along with volunteer retention, your volunteers are going to want to feel appreciated. And you can do a combination of formal and informal ways of showing your organization's appreciation. Some volunteers need a letter of appreciation. That's usually really helpful for college or active military volunteers. That's something that they can put in their college application or like their brag sheet. You could nominate them for an award, either internally with your organization. If it's a larger organization, they could be like volunteer of the year, volunteer of the month, or you could do an external award like the President's Volunteer Service Award. North County Philanthropy Council does a volunteer award celebration every year. So there's a lot of options there. You could create a report on their impact as a volunteer. That kind of depends on your organization. At a volunteer appreciation event that we hosted, I sort of did like infographics on each of our volunteer leaders, where it had the number of hours they've served, the number of volunteers they've led, if they had reported impact measurements in our site, like how many animals they've helped, or people have received donations because of their work. So that's kind of dependent on your software and the amount of tracking your organization does, but I think people really like hearing what they've done singularly as an individual. Kind of a low-hanging fruit thing is just posting about them on social media. I would make sure with that volunteer that that's something that they're comfortable with and that they would appreciate. Some people want more privacy, so that's always a good thing to check in with first. Something we do a lot is handwriting thank you cards. Or during the pandemic, we did a lot of phone calls or just like a casual email if something they did something that you think should be recognized right away. And then there's also informal ways of appreciation, just saying thank you, checking in with them regularly, making them feel supported, creating a culture of gratitude throughout the organization where other staff members are interacting with them and saying thank you for their work, not just like the volunteer coordinator, but generally making them feel like a part of the team, that they're not like a separate entity. That's a really great way to keep volunteers and keep them feeling appreciated. We can go ahead to the next slide. All right, so just some tips I had on volunteer retention. I recommend agreeing on the volunteer's position description before getting started. Something that we end up doing a lot is kind of co-creating a volunteer position with the volunteer. It always starts with something that our organization needs, but we match it with what the skills that the volunteer is trying to gain, or that they're willing to share with us. So for example, we had a high school student reach out wanting to do some HTML coding. Well, our organization needed help making our parts of our website more mobile friendly. So we kind of co-created a position description where he would help us make our website more mobile friendly. And I still use code that he wrote for us today. Always have a clear point person for who will be supervising the volunteer. So that's especially important if there isn't like a specific volunteer coordinator at your organization. They should know who to go to if they have questions or problems, or they're not sure what to do. That should always be clear, and they shouldn't have to go and ask around to different staff members. Another tip is adjusting the amount of structure you provide to the volunteers' needs. Some volunteers are very self-motivated and organized, and they can just kind of, you give them a task and all the information they need and they can just go. Other volunteers might need to be held a bit more accountable, or they might need like weekly check-ins. So I just recommend being flexible to what you can provide and what the volunteer needs. And then the last tip is just to give honest feedback. If a volunteer did something wrong, let them know. Don't make them feel bad about it. But like if they put things in the wrong place, or if something they did was, we've had a volunteer that wasn't quite following food safety codes. It's important that they know what those safety codes are and that you give those information so they can do better next time. The volunteer doesn't want to do a bad job. So I definitely recommend giving honest feedback and not just being grateful that they're there and that they did something. We do want them to be doing work that is helpful for your organization. And that's the end of my presentation. I do think we missed a slide, but I don't know if we have extra time. But I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Jessie. Does anyone have any questions for her?
I do, Jesse, if you don't mind answering this one. So a lot of us have had a pivot with regard to the pandemic, and I'm just curious as to, with regard to like volunteer recruitment, you shared that, sometimes advertising for remote opportunities has been helpful, but do you have any other suggestions about how you've recruited pandemic, post-pandemic? Because I think that all of us have seen that it's been a little bit more challenging to get normal participation, or what would be considered normal participation.
Yeah, we've so our organization partners with other organizations to bring their volunteer opportunities onto our site. So we don't typically post our own volunteer opportunities too often. We did do an event where it was the Festival of Books that the Union Tribune hosted. And we did our own recruitment for that, where we reached out to book clubs at local libraries and their book clubs to find volunteers that would be interested in reading, since that was like the main cause being served at that event. We also, still reaching out to those niche groups is helpful, that would be would care about either the volunteer activity or the cause. So sometimes you need like a craft done, but it's for your military related organization. So maybe you could reach out to different crafting groups. Those definitely exist. Still, I keep hearing that people are having a hard time recruiting with volunteers since the pandemic, but people are still interested in helping out. There's definitely been a bit, people have been feeling a bit of more relaxed about COVID since we've gotten into the green tier and things are looking a little more safe. So we have been seeing a lot more people interested in in-person opportunities, especially if they can be offered outside. In-person inside opportunities can still be a little challenging. So I like to be transparent about if it'll be taking place indoors or outdoors. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Danny.
No, it does. I think that we're always just looking for different ways of connecting, and obviously, as you kind of mentioned, during the pandemic, especially like food bank groups, definitely were really reliant upon volunteers, and I know that some of our partners have shared that post pandemic it's been a little bit more challenging to get those same volunteers back. So also looking at kind of how to position ourselves in front of more people. So
Yeah, I think I think part of it was some organizations had issues with retention during the pandemic, so they weren't really keeping in touch with those volunteers that they weren't engaging while we were sort of shut down, and those folks have kind of lost interest. So people are having to shift to recruiting new volunteers to replace those that they lost during the pandemic.
well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Hey, Danny, I have a question. Jesse, or maybe other organizations here can share if they know of any good organizations where adolescents can volunteer, or teenagers. I get a lot of questions on that, and sometimes I'm not really sure where or who is looking for teenage volunteers. So if anyone here does, or if they know of a good organization, please share.
I guess I'll pitch it. We do have on our site, Hands on San Diego, a way to filter based on the age of the volunteer. So that could help you hone in on some of those age appropriate opportunities. There are a few one of my favorites to suggest for like smaller kids is Botanical Community Development Initiatives in Oceanside. They have a really great garden and can engage like even like 2-year-olds in helping with like seeds and stuff. Their staff have their own small kids, so they've been really great at working with younger volunteers.
That's so cute. Thank you, Jessie. Anyone else? I see a couple of hands up. Anne-Marie?
Yeah, hi Jennifer. Yeah, so we also work with Mama's Kitchen and Meals on Wheels, San Diego County, and they both have discussed, you know, parents or guardians bringing their teenage-aged kiddos along with them to different deliveries. That's especially a really fun opportunity for them during the summer. Another great way for them during the school year for them to get their community service hours, because I know that that's, you know, something that most kids have to hit at that age. So yes, so Meals on Wheels and Mama's Kitchen. And coincidentally, Mama's Kitchen is looking for more volunteers right now.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And Jessie, thank you so much for sharing all that information. That was really great and helpful to all of us. So we will move into our final breakout room activity of the day. So once again, introduce yourself and your organization. And our last segment is going to be all about media. So what is the most recent media release or information in the media that really kind of got your attention or hooked you? Again, we'll do 3 to 5 minutes. So we'll see you in a bit. All right, everyone, welcome back. Hope you got to share a little bit, meet some new people, and we are heading into our last speaker of the day, Anne-Marie. So Anne-Marie has nearly a decade of public relations experience working with education, arts, science, nonprofit, hospitality, transportation, public affairs, and lifestyle brands. She is passionate about working with active duty military and veterans and sharing their untold stories and talent with the world. Her organizational prowess, perseverance, and knack for writing helps her achieve top-tier media results locally, regionally, and nationally. So Anne-Marie, I will hand it to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, let's go to the first slide, please. So hello, everybody. So happy to be here with you today. Yes, so I am a senior account manager at Scatina Daniels Communications and have been with our team for over 7 years now, and in the PR industry for, as mentioned, nearly 10. Side note, it was mentioned that I'm, you know, very passionate about working with the military. I'm also a very proud military ally. Used to be a military dependent, just like Jessie. My dad was a senior chief in the US Navy and served for over 30 years. Recently retired in July 2021. In fact, I had the fun opportunity to swear him into retirement, which he is now fully enjoying every day with my mom. So Scatina Daniels is an award-winning marketing and communications agency, and we strive to help our clients amplify their voices, increase leads for future funding and collaboration, and ultimately inspire actions in real-world change. We've also proudly led the GI Film Festival of San Diego's earned media relations since its inception in 2015, and helped them secure coverage at local, regional, national levels to build awareness each year about not only the festival, but also spotlight the various films, film subjects, and filmmakers and themes. Next slide, please. All right, so during my presentation, I'm going to review what earned media relations is, why it's important, how to get the word out about your event, as well as the different assets you should consider creating. And I will also provide additional best practices for getting the word out about an event or your organization in particular. Next slide. All right, so let's get started. What is earned media relations? So here on the screen, you'll see what we call the PESO model. So PESO stands for, as you see, paid, earned, shared, and owned media. At the top center there in the orange, you'll see earned media. which encompasses media relations, influencer relations, investor relations, word of mouth, and so on. So this PESO model is actually a favorite of ours at Scatena Daniels. For earned media, like all types of media, you can blend it into paid, shared, and owned media. This model is just a really great representation of how merging these different types of media types makes for a much better, well-integrated, and more measurable communications program that truly drives results. So think of it as a puzzle. So with each of these different pieces in the PESO being just as important as the next. But earned media relations is very much more relationship-based, unlike, for instance, paid media, which includes ads and sponsored content. A lot of what earned media is and what we do is building off of relationships that you have with media outlets like reporters, bloggers, influencers, and positioning your event, most importantly, service or organization in a compelling, unique way that encourages those folks to cover. Next slide, please. So what should you know about the media? As you may already know, there are about 3 different types of media outlets you can engage with. That includes print, online, and broadcast. Broadcast can encompass podcasts, radio, TV. Reporters in all of those arenas are constantly looking for story opportunities, but the big question is, what makes your story or what makes your event or organization newsworthy? If you're pitching an event or specific initiative or campaign, finding the why people should care needs to be at the top of your list. We'll get more into different key messages and unique nuggets of information a little later, but overall, I just want to say finding the unique pieces of information, whether it be a heartwarming human interest story or a critical statistic that you want to share with the public, providing those pieces of information to our media friends is just a really great way, and it gives you the best chances for possible coverage. Lastly, building relationships with our media friends are crucial in earned media. As mentioned, earned media results all start out with good relationships. To help cultivate those relationships, consider reaching out to reporters or producers, things like that, not only to pitch your story idea, but just to check in on how they're doing. Or if there's a story that you may need, that they may need help on, you reach out to them and see if you can help them out, or a particular story that you may have seen published or on the TV, on the news that you saw, and you would just want to give them kudos on it. So just like all relationships, our earned media relationships are a two-way street. So give and take. Next slide, please. All right, so let's dive into the different media assets you should consider crafting to get the word out about your event, campaign, or organization. So you would want to consider breaking up the prep and outreach into 2 phases. So here's phase 1. In this first phase, which would typically happen at the very least 2 months prior to your event or campaign launch date, you would start with gathering any necessary information about the event or initiative. This would include any pertinent stats, background details, campaign details, all the who, what, when, where, and why people should care about your organization or event. This should also encompass identifying spokespersons, English speaking and Spanish speaking, just based on where we live. Spanish speaking is a huge asset to have in your organization. But identifying spokespersons that would be quoted in a news release or used for interviews ideally happens in this first phase. And spokespersons include your primaries. So for instance, your CEOs, your executive directors, any other organization leaders. But this also includes human interest stories, like I mentioned earlier, that you can use to geo-target different community publications and outlets. So what's the human interest story? It's the nugget of inspiration that you dig through your volunteer base, your client base, staff to find. For example, every year with the GI Film Festival of San Diego, we identify filmmakers and film subjects that have the most compelling story, which, as you can imagine, can be very difficult with it being a film festival. All of their stories are compelling, all of their stories are unique. But when you narrow down your list to a film subject that has a unique background and has a very captivating story, and trying to geo-target where they live, that'll help narrow down your list a lot. For instance, if you can hone in on awareness months or holidays. For the festival a couple of years ago, we honed in around Suicide Awareness Month. We had a film that focused on veteran suicide. And coincidentally, the film director was also a film subject who could speak to the topic in great depth. And also from firsthand experience, we also had an advisory committee member who was also able to provide their input based on their experiences in combat, and we're able to pair her up with the film director to create this really great synergy that could be used in interviews. So when we identified them as a newsworthy story, a newsworthy pairing, we pitched them out both separately and as a pair, and received great interest from media and secured coverage in the Union Tribune, CBS, and a lot of other folks as well. So overall, find the human interest stories and dig for those nuggets of inspiration. From there, still in phase one, with the information you gathered, you would then craft at the very least 3 to 5 key messages that would be used in all PR materials, including news releases, when you're talking to media, social media, things like that. In phase one, you would also confirm, please do this, spokesperson availability for any media interviews. I know Jennifer and Danny on here, I've reached out to you several times for different media opportunities, and we've worked together on that aspect. So I love working with the advisory committee for the GI Film Festival. They always make themselves available. So yes, so in this phase one, make sure you get your spokesperson's availability once you identify them. You want to avoid chasing schedules when you're in event week and interview opportunities are popping up left and right. Overall, it will just be easier all around to have spokesperson availability confirmed ahead of reaching out to media. Once you have your key messages and spokespersons lined up, then you can begin crafting your news release or media advisory. I'm mentioning 2 different documents here, but what is the difference between the 2? Well, a news release is a more in-depth look at the event or campaign or your organization in particular. A media advisory is considered more of a high level, just the details listed out, which is used more for day of on-site coverage, the day that you're launching your initiative or the day of your event, versus long lead coverage with an in-depth news release. Next slide, please. So in phase 2, once you get your news release or media advisory through your approval process and it's finalized, then you can deploy it. For a media advisory, again, that's the high level document that should be deployed at least 2 weeks prior to the event or campaign launch date. And again, a news release should be deployed at least 1 month in advance of the event or launch date to create that great awareness. Remember to redistribute each respective document out periodically leading up to the said date, as well as follow up, of course, to secure those opportunities. Also in phase 2, it's all about securing and coordinating those interviews. For those interviews, make sure you're prepping your spokespersons accordingly with any prep documents and any necessary media trainings in advance. Next slide. All right, so you've secured the interviews, but what do you do with them now that they're done? My 2 best practices for getting the word out, my 2 favorite best practices rather, about your event or campaign is share those interviews. For broadcast, some stations post those interviews and stories to their website, which makes it easy to share the link on social media or in newsletters or online somewhere. But unfortunately, there is no guarantee that the interview will live on their website forever. So you don't want a broken link on your social media pages. So it's always best to get the video file when you can, whether that's from your PR agency or looking into a monitoring service or subscription like TVI's, Critical Mention, or Parker News Service for broadcast clips, or a Burrell's Loose subscription for print coverage. Getting the video files and different print PDFs gives you the opportunity to use the coverage you secured organically on social media, in newsletters, and online. You can also build an archive page, kind of like a press room on your website for media coverage as well. But all in all, don't let these interviews go to waste. use the earned content as much as you can to build awareness. Again, earned content, it's not paid content, so it's mainly through the relationships that you're able to build with reporters and influencers, or that your PR agency is able to build. There's no dollars that are technically put toward that, so use it as much as you can. And to also showcase your work to potential donors, sponsors, or anybody that could be a potential stakeholder in your organization. Last slide, please. All right, so now that is all I have for you today. I just wanted to say thank you so much again to all of you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions, as everybody else said, about what I just went over, or you can feel free to email me directly. I will put my information in the chat.
Thank you so much, Anne Marie. Does anyone have any questions for her?
Shelby, there was one question that we got when folks registered for this event. And the question is, are there any recent successful uses of social media that might not have happened without its use?
So that's social media, as you know, it's not so much along the lines of earned media relations. That's a very interesting question. Could you rephrase it? Because I'm not exactly sure what it is that the person's asking for.
I know I was a little unclear too, but it states, are there any recent successful uses of social media, which I think might be the unclear part, that might not have happened without its use?
Yeah.
Is anyone here? Did anyone submit that question? And maybe could further explain?
Yeah. Well, I can say that, oh, I'm sorry, was someone about to answer? Okay, so I can say, you know, as far as social media, I did touch on this a little bit, but you know, if you're able to use the coverage that you receive through your earned media outreach, through earned media efforts, I mean, doing that in all is very successful in itself. Sometimes you do an interview and it goes missing, and all that effort that you put into it, it's you know, it's losing its traction. It's a lot of times an interview isn't really evergreen, so you're not able to reuse it again, only for case study purposes or to really engage potential sponsors. So I mean, if that helps that question at all, if you know who reached out on social about that question, I'm happy to reach out to them directly and talk it through with them.
Thank you. I don't know if we have, I don't know, maybe Danny can see and to see if they submitted their name along with their questions, but thank you so much, Anne Marie.
Yeah, I can reach back later and Anne Marie provide you a follow-up. But I have a question. And you kind of answered part of it, but I was just, you know, we're always looking for tips or tricks in terms of starting the relationship with, you know, media. Like, how do you do your homework as to identify who's the right person to actually reach out to first? Like, what's that first step that you suggest for our audience?
Yeah, the first step is definitely, you know, like you said, doing that research, watching those TV news stations, looking at their social media, reading the UT or the Pomerado News or the Rancho Bernardo News, you know, all of those different publications that you want to engage with, and just take a look and see who's covering, you know, who's covering caregiving, who's covering military stories, you know, things like that. That way you can get an idea. And sometimes they are listed out as far as, you know, reporters, their beats are also listed out alongside them somewhere in, you know, print or on their website. So that way you can get a good idea of who you're reaching out to. And it also gives you, with that research, it also gives you kind of an in you're able to say, hey, I saw this really great story that you did recently on military caregivers. We do this at Say San Diego, and we can, provide you with a spokesperson who could speak to A, B, and C. If you ever need someone to provide a soundbite or provide a quote or a stat, or if you want, if you need someone to speak to a specific topic, this person is available.
Thank you for that. And I do have one more follow-up unless anyone else has any last questions. It's just that, there's a lot of different groups here, a lot of different causes that, we're all involved with. Sometimes, I mean, it's been something that happens that out of the blue, we might get an inquiry from a station, but it may not be the right fit.
Right.
So in terms of when you are situated with those types of, prospective interviews, do you have any suggestions for our audience in terms of what to do?
Yeah, I would never close the door completely. If something isn't a right fit or it's a last minute, you know all about that, Danny and Jennifer, the last minute interviews I make you guys do for me. If it's a last minute interview and nobody's available, or you just don't have someone who can speak to that specific topic, of course you have to decline, but never close the door completely. Let them know, hey, we don't have someone available at that time. Do you have any availability during this time? Or continue to try to keep that door open and say, hey, we can't talk about that topic, but we can talk about these topics. If you ever need someone to go over these different these topics with your readers or with your viewers, we're happy to provide that as well. Again, never close the door completely and continue building that relationship.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Anne Marie. So just to close things out, I'm going to pass it over to Stacy Childs.
All right. I think we went through the questions. So we are coming on 2 minutes of time, but so often when we do these events, they are weighed heavily on like networking and just connecting with one another. So we do, if anybody has like a brief announcement that they want to share, maybe an upcoming event or program, we definitely want to make a space for that here. And so if anyone wants to share out, if they have anything coming up, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear your announcements. And if not, I will make one quick plug for our SDMFC annual summit coming up on October 28th. Did I get that correct, Danny? At Marina Village. And so just be on the lookout for that information. We would love to have all of you. And since you are our members, you do get a discount in your ticket. So keep out information there. You can go over to the next slide. And so a big thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you everybody for sharing your time and expertise with our audience, and many of us, including myself, I feel like are leaving feeling inspired and eager to adopt so many of your tips and tricks of getting the word out. So thank you once again to all of our speakers, and a big thank you to all of our members for your support and this little network of community that we're establishing within SDMFC. And we encourage you to share the information with your own organizations today, and Danny will send out this recording as well. And this is our last networking training of the 2022. There will be one more that typically is in December, and it's around just a little fun networking kind of winter event. Shelby and I were talking earlier. We would love it if that was in person. So stay tuned for that information. And going into 2023, we look forward to continuing to organize and provide these member-only networking and training events. And so please take the post survey that Danny just dropped in the chat box, because your suggestions and topics will definitely inform next year's topics and themes. So thank you everybody again, and we will see you hopefully in December. And thanks again to all of our speakers. Bye everybody.
Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.